how to make a histogram. Well, a histogram is a graph that represents the number of data values that fall in an interval. Sometimes you'll also hear these referred to as bins or even a bucket. I might accidentally use those words interchangeably as well. The horizontal axis on this graph is a continuous scale that shows the intervals. The vertical axis shows the frequency. In other words, how many data values are in the interval. Each interval should be the same width. And there should be no space between the bars. And we'll talk about what that looks like and why that's kind of relevant. Okay, so you might be asked to make a histogram from a set of data like this. So it says in example 1, a hat manufacturer is trying to determine how many of each hat size they should be producing. The manufacturer collects the head circumferences in millimeters of a random group of people. And there's a whole long list of numbers. Okay, so the first step is going to be to create what we call a frequency table. So a frequency table, let me write that down, create a frequency table. Looks something like what we have here to the left. We first need to have equal intervals. So if you look at each of these ranges, from 510 to 529, you might be inclined to say there's 19 numbers in there, but there's actually 20 numbers. Double check yourself. You'll see if you start 510 and count up to 529, there's 30 numbers there. 30 numbers here. I'm sorry, not 30. 20 numbers here, 20 numbers here. Each of them is the exact same size of 20 different numbers. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to go through this list of numbers, and we're going to make old-fashioned tally marks to count up how many fall in each interval. There are 6 intervals that we have listed here. So 513 is, I'm going to zoom in here a little bit. 513 is in the first interval. 525 is also in the first interval. 531, though, is in the next interval. 533 is there as well. So I'm going to continue to mark all the other points in the intervals that they fall in. So fill in a bunch nicely. These ones are in order, so I'm crossing them off up at the top as I'm marking them down below. Speeding things up here just a little bit for time's sake. We're almost done there, just a few more points. Range. The tally marks are optional, but it is sometimes nice to do it this way first, and then come over here and actually just count up how many we have. So there was 2 in this range, 8 here, 15, 9, 4, and 2. So this is a completed frequency table. Step 2 is going to be often done for you. It's part of the frequency table. This is that we need to make all intervals the same size. So as I said, this was done for us already. And step 3 is to, as we did, count the data points in each interval. Great. So all of that was part of making the frequency table. But we have yet to actually start the histogram. So we're going to now move to our histogram space down here. And while I don't like to do this for a lot of graphs, we can see that our data doesn't start until 510. So we are going to put a break in our graph right there, because we want to start our horizontal axis with these interval amounts. And so the first amount is going to be our 510 right there. So we're going to make marks that basically show the beginning number of each interval. So 510, 530, 550, 570, 590, 610. All right, 550, 570, 590, 610. And I forgot, we really do need 630 as the next mark there. Okay, so we have the scale there. That is on the horizontal axis. And on the vertical axis, we're going to put our frequency. So we really need to think about our frequency numbers. We get all the way up to 15. I'm going to go ahead and count by 2. So I'm going to go 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, and 16. Okay, so we want to make a bar that is as high as the frequency for each interval. So in the first set there, we just go up to 2. And we're going to fill in that whole space there. Sometimes it's nice to shade it in to show clearly where that range is. Our next one goes up to 8. So I'm going to make another bar, and I'm going to keep it right edge to edge with the other bar. Go up to 8, over and down to complete that whole region there. Notice there is no space in between them because there's really no space in between the intervals. They go right up to each other, one next to the next. All right, our next one goes up to 15. And so that is halfway in between our 14 or 16. And we'll do that. This will be a little nicer on some graph paper. All right, and then our next range is 9, so right around here. Next range is 4, about there. And then our last range is 2. Okay, so let's take some notes on what we did here. We are going to graph the intervals. I guess graph the frequencies using bars. We may, depending on your data, use a break. That's what this is here. This is a break to show that the scale is not consistent at the beginning. The only time we would see something that looks like a space is if the frequency is 0. Then we get a bar with no height. Great. So that is a histogram. Let's just talk a little bit about some of the strengths and weaknesses of a histogram. So one thing that's a big strength of a histogram is they are better for larger data sets. So if you remember from our line plots, we had to make a point for every single data value. We didn't do that here. We made bars that represented multiple data values. So that can be great when we have a large set of data. It does show the shape of the data very well. And it is good for data with high variability. What are some weaknesses? Well, one of its strengths can be a little bit of a weakness because while it's good for large data sets, it does not show individual data values. And why do we care about that? Well, values. If you're trying to actually find the mean of the set of data, the mean of the set of data would require you to add up all the individual data values and then divide by the total number of data values. And you can't do that from just the information in a histogram. You need the actual numbers. So let's just say that here. We cannot calculate the mean and not exactly the median either. We can know the middle range, but we can't know the middle number. So those are some of the weaknesses of a histogram. Let's look at one more example. Okay, so in this example, it says listed are the grams of carbohydrates in hamburgers at selected fast food restaurants. Okay, so again, we see the intervals are marked for us, and I hate this notation. What this is really saying is it goes up to 25. It's less than 25. So 25 is not in this interval. 25 is in this interval. So this would be really the numbers, if we're talking about just whole numbers, 20, 21, 22, 23, and 24. If there was decimals, they would go all the way up to, 24.99999, but would not encompass 25. Okay, let's count through. This time the data is not put sequentially. So we see 33, and that is in this interval. I know you're capable of doing the rest of these, so I'm just going to speed this up real quick, but complete the following tally marks for the rest of the table. 1 for the first, one frequency of 1, then 2, 4, 0, 6, 4, 2, 0, 0, 1. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and draw the histogram for this frequency table. So just the first quadrant of a coordinate plane here. And here we've got frequencies. And on the bottom we've got carbohydrates. All right, so the lowest we have is 20. So we'll put a break in our graph, and we'll start right here with 20. And we're basically going to put every 5 all the way up to 70. So we'll count by 5s all the way up to 70 and add our numbers in. Okay, so our intervals go all the way up to 6. So that's not too high, so I'm just going to count by 1s. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so our first interval just has a height of 1. There's our bar. Our second one has a height of 2. Third is a height of 4. Now, this is the first time we've seen this. Here we have a height of 0 for this next interval. So, I mean, you don't even have to draw it, but it is basically like a bar of height 0. So it kind of looks like there's a gap in our bars for the first time, but it's really just because there's a frequency of 0 in that space. And then we get a bar of 6 frequency. And then 4, 2, and then we get 2 that are 0, so 0 here and 0 here, and then finally a bar that is a height of 1. And so there is our histogram for this set of data. So in this one we did see that there are actually 3 places where it looks like there's a gap, but that's because the frequency is 0. So that is how we make histograms from sets of data. We start by making a frequency table and then graphing them on a continuous scale. That's all for watching.